Hey Vivian, my name's Alex. I'm one of the TAs at Art Prof, and we're going to be talking through your portfolio today. And how this is going to work is I'm just going to run through your portfolio and use your artist statement as a guide. What I got from it is that you're really understanding what art means to you and how you want to play your role into it. And you're thinking about animation, but it sounds like it's too early to tell. It looks like there are similar parts to these sculptures, but with separate parts as well. These two make me think of how we're going to divide this, which is in images that are really you showing your style and your voice, and then images of you searching for your style and voice. Now, searching can come from playing around with different media, different settings, different styles. The key is that the exploratory ones at the end of the day shouldn't be in a final portfolio. As you're going forward and thinking about the 10-15 images within a portfolio to show either a gallery or a studio or something like that, you're going to want to narrow down the best work. And these guys, you're showing some cool stuff. There's an element here of twisting of the forms and playing with the geometry, but at the end of the day, they're so different from the rest of your work that I would take from these a list of what you like in them, the things that you think you're showing well as an artist. I would recreate them in an image that better suits your portfolio needs. Now this one as well, and it has, similar to these two, but it has this attitude like a assignment-driven art. When you compare this to the images we'll talk about later in your portfolio, this definitely reads as like a drawing assignment. Now that's not to say there's not wonderful ability in here. You want to be thinking about how to fine-tune your portfolio to show exactly what you want. There are some great, cool things. You're doing what will come up later in your work as something you're very, very good at, which is getting the eye to travel throughout the piece and really discover new areas with it every time you loop through. You're drawn to that back left corner first, or I am, because of that high contrast in the window. And then because of the composition and how you've angled the objects, it weaves you around into the sheets and it curves you around. Now the big black bag in the top center, that just stops you. So I would do something to change that around, put something in front of it, work with it a little bit more to kind of make sure that it keeps your eyes flowing. This is a beautiful painting. When you really zoom in and look at the details there and how you're creating space and depth with that. And the problem is it's very similar to this last one where it's showing a lot of ability that you have. This one especially with color and space, but it's not showing your character as an artist too much. It's showing your technical ability, but not that character. When we get to the end of this and we're looking at your work that really reads as your personal feeling, finding ways to show this technical ability in some of those images, and I think that's when you're going to be right on the money. In your artist statement, you were talking about how you weren't sure you're thinking animation, but as you say, who knows where it will lead? That's how you kind of fine-tune and focus on this. You'll start by mixing your technique with your style, what you feel as an artist you want to convey, and that's how you're going to find your, let's say, purpose as an artist. It sounds very lofty to say, but that's how you do it. You find the work you want to make with what the world needs from you, and that's how you find the harmony between those. This one it's alright, but it's so different from the rest of the images in the portfolio. So there's good qualities to it, but it just reads as like a play, as an experimentation. Not to say that those aren't valuable. Those aren't valuable in a portfolio. Take what you learn from these and then you bring them forward. That being said, it is the most charming little dog robot I've ever seen, and I'm in love with him. These are exactly what I was talking about with these earlier pieces. Compare these two sculptures with the first two sculptures we talked about. Now these first two definitely read as an assignment. You're playing around, you're learning, and then with these, you're taking what you've learned and you're executing it with a message that you have, and that's super cool. I'm really liking the use of like the advertisements to create the structure, but also then become part of the background. It's making a really, really cool image. I'm wild about that hand. It's so bizarre, just that really the photograph of the hand cut out and it just looks so alien attached to this. I think these are really nicely done. This one as well, it's showing a lot of great technical ability, but it's pushing it further than, say, this painting, where this one is a beautiful painting technically, but it doesn't show a lot of your artistic voice. Like how these start to show your voice, so too does this. You're letting yourself get more fun, more abstract. You're playing around with it. It's a still life, but we know it's you. Does that make sense? Your thumbprint as an artist is still present and still visible in this. Now, as we're working with this, you're doing really, really smart things with color here. Playing around with the yellows, the purples, and the blues. The reason what you're doing works in this is because so often people forget that brown is a yellow. And look at how those browns and those umbers are playing around with the purples in the piece. It's really nice. And yeah, it gets muddy in some points, but overall, the play of color is very similar to the play of value you show us in this drawing. And it lets the mind and the eye of the viewer very much explore the piece. Yeah, you're doing some really fun things with this. And look at the dramatic, what looks like a cantaloupe there, near the center, that dramatic carving at the bottom of the dark brown shell, and then the opening of the light in there. That is really beautifully done. This one, it doesn't show your technique as strongly as this one. More so, it doesn't show your style as much either. I would nixay this one out of the portfolio, but you're doing some things here that I'd like to see incorporate into other pieces. As we talk about your pieces later on, and then say, go back to this one as an example, your colors are very vibrant and strong, and that works for you. When you take the muted colors, those can play around really well with more intense colors. So imagine if you had the color palette of this one with like a bright popping yellow like in those advertisements there. How would that look? Play around with how you can play with the volume of the color. This is a really cool piece, and we're using this as the beginning in this slideshow to talk about how you begin to incorporate your personal style with the technique you know. Let's compare it to this drawing back here. The drawing shows your technical ability, but this one starts to show your style ability as well. And that's really exciting. There's a downside to that though. When you look at the hands and the feet look just as close as the hands. And the reason that is because the line quality is the same in the feet and the legs as it is in the hands. More so the value, the feet being very dark, they come forward. And so the whole torso, legs, and feet area appears very flat and on the same plane as the hands. So the challenge moving forward is how to incorporate your style and your own personal hand into it without sacrificing some of the technique that you have. Technique shouldn't be seen as a limitation. Technique is not a fence you have to work within. Technique is the method to show your best work. There are thousands and thousands of examples of artists melding their personal style with the technique that they know and have taken years to cultivate. And it's never a surrender to use technique to show space and value and form and dimension. This is one of my favorite pieces that you have. It's such a cool image, and the light and the dark is balancing perfectly. And I think it's so strong because you're letting yourself only play with two things, black and white. You're creating the shades of gray with a lighter or thinner application of the black. The excitement of it compositionally is heightened by balancing it with the simplicity of it. So when you take, say, this image, it's very exciting, both compositionally and with color. And it's really interesting with the application of the paint and the forms. This one, it's really just black brush and India ink. But in that, you're showing levels of detail, levels of complexity, and the eye traveling through this is having so much fun. And similar to the drawing at the beginning, you discover something new every time your eye travels through this piece, which is a really successful thing you're accomplishing. Now we're getting to the work that really comes off as your personal style. Let's just take a moment to look at this and then compare it with some of the other more technical pieces in the past. Comparing it, say, with this image, which is very strong technically and personally. These images as well. And then you have these images which are very strong technically, but not so much personally. You're showing so much person here. The technique could work. It needs to be pushed a little bit more. You're starting to do things with line variation and line weight, not to mention like excitement of playing around with some colors you don't normally use and some textures. But there's parts of it that seem a little heavy-handed and a little overdone. Take, for instance, the fire in the background. The thick black lines on that have this heavy weight to it, which serves really well in the purple figure. But with the fire, it makes a confusion of space. What this reminds me of is you should really look up Salvador Dali's series on Dante's Inferno, and I think that's going to be a really fun thing for you to explore. Not to keep it too focused on images of the Inferno, but William Blake's work also reminds me of the playfulness and fun you're having with these. I'm liking the texture you're incorporating into the color as well, where it's not simply like a flat applied color. You're letting some excitement happen, and the light and the value that you're putting into that helps to create more of a feeling of this character you've created. It feels like it's almost conveying social message, but I'm not quite too sure what that is. If I'm mistaken in reading that, then that's to me as a viewer. But if there's a message intended in it and it's not really coming across, then as the artist you have to find a way of how to translate that. Man, I'm really liking what's happening with the beard. Like the thickness and the thinness of line variation in that beard, that's like the money, that's how you're making the work feel vibrant and alive and room to explore, showing strong technical ability, but also that personal touch that only you have. This is a really fun piece. Really like the muted colors in this. Just like in the beard with this one, you're really letting the line weight start to form the piece and inform the viewer on where you want our eye to go. Line weight is used to show form and weight. So when you look at the variation of the line weight you're having throughout the piece, it's going really well. But it's the same differences within each one of the figures and parts of this piece that the eye doesn't know what to focus on, what to look at, where to go. It knows to go on this journey through the piece, but it doesn't know where you want to stand. This is a fun, exciting piece, but I don't know if it has the strength that some of the others we've talked about has. There are things about this that I love. So if you look in the bottom right corner, down with the ochreish color going through that seaweed kelp, that is some beautiful texture and technique you're creating there. Really stellar. But overall, the colors seem a little bland. I think the play of the dark black and the colors here doesn't work as strong as it does in the others. These two, the black plays so well, and I think it's because it's not pure black. Look at the texture you've applied into it. This one, the black is just so punchy. And if you look at this image in a grayscale, you'll see how strong and how solid that black is, and it really doesn't play too well with the rest of the image. This one has the sense where I feel like there's a message here, but it's not quite coming across. Since I'm not sure the message intended, I'm not sure how best to fix that. It's a little bit better than this one with the application of the marker, but there's still that weakness of the heavy punching black really does too much. Notice how you're using black in times, but also a darker shade of the color at times. Or for how this one, you're using the black to kind of tie the whole piece together. With this one and this one, the black is selective and it's very strong and punchy. And the color application is not quite as sophisticated as it is in your other pieces. You're doing some really great color combinations with this, with the reds and the pinks playing with the cool blues and the greens, but it isn't being pushed as successfully as it is in your other pieces. Let's pause on this one and go back. Think of the colors when you go back and look at this one. Now again, you're seeing what I mean when the later pieces really show your personal voice and your personal style. But look at the strength of color you're using in these. What would happen if you did an image with this similar style, but with the subject matter of these? That would be something I'd be very interested to see. I'm not saying that this image is where you should take all the rest of your work. That's not what I'm saying at all. You're in a really cool moment where you're discovering where your work's next step will be. And I'm not saying this style is the answer, but I'm saying the technique you're showing in this and the technique you're showing in this is the answer. Take that technique and move it forward with the style that you're incorporating here, and I think that's going to lead you to some really cool places. Before we move on from this one, compositionally it's also very boring compared to the other pieces. Something that's really common with art that tells a story or is narrative is that can become very distracting. And as an artist, I get this all the time. I get distracted by the story in a piece and then the composition falls to the wayside. Now, if I'm, say, working on a still life for practice, then I'm going to spend a lot of time on the composition because I know that's all that's carrying it, No one's going to be brought to tears by a painting of an apple conceptually, but stylistically and compositionally, you can maybe get some tears out of that. I get the sense that there's a message here, but I'm not quite getting what it is. I love the weirdness of it, though. The faces and the heads are so cool, and like that funky alien head just in there, like you're doing some really cool stuff. Also, the figure in the brownish green coat. Man, look at the line quality in that. Look at the feet and the vibrancy in your brush, like effortless confidence in that. And that's going so cool for you. And that's the kind of stuff that needs to be brought into the rest of the piece. Some other parts of the piece, like the woman, areas of the heads, they're charming, but they seem a lot put into them and like a focus to them that doesn't have the freeness and the looseness that like the figure on the left does. Man, yeah, you're doing some really bold things with colors here. Like purple is so hard to use in a piece, but the purple's playing so well because you're knowing what to play the purple with. You're using it with those warm browns and the yellows throughout, and those are playing really well. You definitely have a good handle of color. Just keep at it with it. It's one of your strong suits, definitely. This one is, I'd take it out of the portfolio. It's not showing anything that we haven't seen in other pieces. It's a nice image like of showing the story of the Lion King, but in a different vein, almost like your stylistic touch on it. The New Yorker, when they have the film reviews, and they always have an illustration of the film rather than just a screenshot of the film. I could see it in that kind of editorial setting. But yeah, as it is right now, I think that it appears very flat and that there's not enough going on with color and line and composition to make it strong enough to compare with the rest of the pieces you've shown. We're ending on this one because it shows so well exactly what the rest of your work is leading to. This shows the technique, the playfulness, the fun, but also the personal style you have and that kind of freedom to be your own artist. Now, this piece, it's not perfect. I'm not saying like, ta-da, you've did it. Like, you're done. You can retire now. No more art for you. I'm saying this is that good first step. It's taking the skill set and the technique that you're showing in images like this and images like this, but it's bringing into it the fun and the vibrancy of some of the images like this. And now that we've gone through the cycle, I hope that you can see what I mean where these images stylistically, so much fun, so much to play with. Technically, they need some improvement. Whereas images like this and this, technically on top of their game. So good, so strong, so powerful. But stylistically, they're lacking what makes you you. This one, man, look at that. It's just firing on all cylinders. The playfulness you're doing with those flashes of yellow in the hair at the top, the exaggeration of the features, the haunting look in this face. You're really doing some cool stuff with this. My praise of this one is not to say, like, this is it. This is the style you should work with. More so what I'm saying is this shows your style, your voice, your technique all together. Whereas the rest of the images in your portfolio, it's very disparate. And it's showing, at times it seems like it's showing almost one or the other. Whereas this one is showing everything you can do and more. The portfolio is always a kind of thing where it's never going to be done. There's a great painting called The Artist on His Deathbed. It's so funny because there's like a nurse next to the deathbed and the artist leaning forward, just doodling on the wall with charcoal. I love that painting because it does show like this journey will never be done for us. Every time I've had my portfolio review, people are like, all right, this one image is good. Do more like that. So taking this and the knowledge you've learned from exploring things with style like these and having a message that you want to convey, think about how to show your style and the messages stronger without being overdone, and then incorporate that with technique shown in these and in these and in these as well. Now, whether that leads you into the realm of two-dimensional illustrative work, more graphic, or whether that leads you into a more sculptural work, or into a more painterly kind of realm. That choice is up to you, and your journey of your artistic expression has only just begun, as you say. And I'm so excited to see where you take it. And there's that great phrase where whenever you choose one direction, you say goodbye to another one. But don't feel that way with art. You can go any direction you want to and keep playing around with different worlds. Even if you decide to pursue animation, you have such a strong voice as a painter that can take you far as well. Or even if you decide to focus on fine art and images like that, don't let that stop you from playing around with animation. There's that idea that to be animation, it's either all or nothing, when in reality, there are so many artists I know who either don't work as artists or work in art in another expression, and they do animation on the side just for themselves. So I'm really excited to see where your work goes with this, and thanks so much for sharing your portfolio, Vivian.